who you are, Sean?
Yeah, okay, so my name is Sean. I'm the director of Daughter of the Law. Um, previous experience. Um, I started as a writer before I knew what I wanted to do at all. During summers and when I was real young, I would always write instead of being a social butterfly like most other people. I um, wrote a lot, scripts. Well, no, actually, I didn't start. I started with short stories and just rambling stuff that took up pages and pages on the computer. And eventually, I went to scripts. And then in high school, I was about 15 or so. Um, Still not very socially active for the most part. Like at least from, I carry a lot of emotional baggage. Like I was probably fine, but um, to me, I felt like I was socially inadequate. But there was this one really attractive senior, and I was a freshman, freshman first year, senior fourth year, and she was an actress, and her name was Whitney, and she got me involved with drama um, because she had read my stuff. We were in a club together that put on short stories, scripts, put them into a book. Um, so she was directing a short play that needed a guy and a girl that were supposed to be a married couple. I forget what it was called, but it was something about socialism. Um, and I forget why she cast me really, other than that we had known each other from the club. I'm not quite sure what she saw in me, but I had a really good time doing it. It was the first time she ever directed anything. And we had such a good time, and she said that I had done a really good job and I should keep up with this. And that was in the fall. And in the spring, she was in our school, random school plays, the fall and the spring we have school play. She was always in the school plays, doing the leads mostly. And she was in the spring, and I auditioned mainly because of her. And I got a fairly good-sized part, which sort of led to some narcissism since she had cast me, and then first time I ever auditioned, I get a fairly good-sized part. The part that I got was a little annoyed because I never had one scene with her. But we still communicate, we still email each other, even though she left after my first year there. And I continued acting partly because of her, partly because it was something that I found I enjoyed. So I continued that all through high school, and then when I was applying for universities, I was applying as an actor. But I also wanted a university that did film because I was always interested in film. So when I got to a university that accepted me basically because it was the only one that accepted me that didn't require an audition. Most of the other ones required auditions, and I failed it. So all my narcissism kind of went down the tube at that point because I finally learned in the real world where I stood up, and it wasn't all that high from an acting standpoint. So, but the university that I went to, Franklin Marshall, was fairly good because it didn't have a whole lot of acting, filmmaking, talent people to hog up equipment, hog up roles. So when I got there, I was still doing plays. I was doing Macbeth. I was doing stuff in the Black Box Theater, always doing something. My first year, I also held a camera for the first time, and I did a romantic tragedy called Lament. I still had a lot of emotional baggage with me, so sort of I don't really do sad, depressing things anymore. But as with most people that I see that I've come in contact with, other filmmakers and stuff, they tend to start out with a lot of depressing stuff, and people just don't want to see depressing stuff that makes you want to go out and, like, a lot of suicides, there wasn't a suicide in Lament. It was basically about a guy and a girl, and the guy falls in love with the girl, but then the girl dumps the guy because she decides to go back with her old boyfriend. So, and then the guy laments about it. And I showed it, I used the camera, I edited it myself, I wrote the script myself, and I showed it to an audience, and as a freshman, they thought it was pretty good. I got even more notoriety doing the film than I had with the theater. So I kept doing that, and the following year I did that summer I went to Vassar College, and I was working with actual film, 16 millimeter. I made a couple of short films. And then coming back to my university for the second year, I did an action comedy called Danger Girls. It was basically Charlie's Angels, only they were college students by day and crime fighters by night. And given that we didn't have a budget, Daughter of the Law, we didn't have much of a budget to speak up for this either. But without a budget, I think I was able to push the limits of what I can do without a budget for an action comedy with Danger Girl, because we had a lot of martial art fight sequences, which weren't very good. But overall, and it took about the same time as Daughter of the Law, it took about a year. But I had a real good time doing it, and I showed it to even more people. I got press about it, ran in a local theater, and I got in the newspaper, I got interviewed, photographed, stuff like that. So, and I'm still acting to this day, but film is, I feel like I have a lot more control in film. I get my vision across more, and when you're the director, you're in charge. So, long story short, that's my previous experience, and now I'm doing Daughter of the Law, which is the first serious type thing I'm doing that's not depressing. So, yeah. Most of my answers are not going to be as long as that one.
No, that's okay. That's
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
How your idea for this started out?
Yeah. So I came to England because after 2 years of my home university, felt like I was getting clustered, sheltered. I needed a different atmosphere, a different group of people to work with, because not as many, the actors here in England, the actors in Daughter of the Law, are among the best that I've ever worked with. When I've been doing most of my other projects, there's a fair group of people that I've kind of pushed them to their limits in terms of what I want to do. And I don't really feel like I'm pushing them, but after I do a film with them, I can't really get them to do another one. I can't really figure out if it's something that I'm doing, because with Daughter of the Law, I'm doing basically the same thing, and it may be just different types of actors. But I kind of got off track. What was I?
How the idea began.
Oh yeah, okay. So I'm in England. I'm in England for a different group of people, and I was in England for a couple weeks, and I hadn't filmed anything in about a month, so I wanted to go out and do something. I didn't know what. So I figured, well, I had been to Great Yarmouth before because my family had gone down to Italy, and before we came back to the US, we went to the UK to see what my university was like, since my parents can't come down every so often because it's 2,000 plus miles. So they saw what my university was like, and then since Great Yarmouth was close by, I went to Great Yarmouth. And I wanted to film there, and being the way that I am, whether you want to call me a womanizer or a feminist or whatever, I wanted to do some sort of beach shoot, but although it was kind of cold, so I said we'd do it in sweaters and stuff. So I was in Drama Society, and I emailed a bunch of people, and I got a fairly good response, although a number of those people never turned up. But Sarah did turn up, and she was, I think, the only person from the Drama Society email that I was really actively like, yeah, come down, because she seems like a real interesting person. And I had like a bunch of questions to ask people. But basically I just wanted to go up and see, like, yeah, would you look good in some sort of beach shoot? And Sarah caught on with that right away. And we had about a half-hour conversation, and she seemed really interesting. So we went down, we took her car and Rachel's car, who was another person in the beach shoot, down to Great Yarmouth. We had the shoot, which didn't go quite as well as I thought because of the cold and everything. But I was still able to use some of the beach shoot in the title sequence for Daughter of the Law. Although I didn't know it was going to be for Daughter of the Law back then. I was always thinking of my next big thing, and I think it was when we were walking from one end of the beach to the other on the boardwalk, and Sarah was talking with Rachel, and I was with them. And Sarah was talking about doing law and her philosophy and stuff like that. And it hit me then that my next big thing could involve Sarah in some capacity. I was thinking some sort of romance thing, going back to the romance that I started freshman year. After the beach shoot on Channel 4, I was catching the last couple episodes of Ally McBeal, which I had seen sporadically. And seeing Ally McBeal and also Sex and the City, and knowing Sarah and wanting her to be involved in something, I came up with the idea to write this script. And so I basically wrote the script with Sarah in mind after I asked her if she wanted to be in something like this. Can't remember if I wrote the script before I solidified the fact that she'd be in it, but nevertheless, I wrote the script with kind of a hybrid of Sarah's character, Whitney's character, and my own character. Since I'm not the most masculine person, there are aspects of Whitney Warren that are actually me, and Sarah and Whitney. So yeah, that's how it all came about.
Okay.
Do you want to ask a question of your own at this point, or just keep going?
Most of us got like the casting process. So I was just quite curious to see if you like.
Oh yeah, okay. Well,
working with everybody and that kind of thing.
Casting
Because
process?
everyone's so different.
Yeah, okay. Casting process. Sarah was easy since without her this wouldn't happen. So that was, I wrote this with her in mind, like I just said. So like whatever was going to go on, it was going to have Sarah in it. Who did I cast next? I think I had an audition process for, I put in the Drama Society email, and I put their official acting group, Minotaur. I got a good amount of people from there. I auditioned a couple people. Specifically, I was auditioning some, the toughest person to find was Lathrop, a romantic interest for Sarah Whitney. And originally it was supposed to be this guy named Ryan, who I was in a play called 12th Night at the time. And Alex was in that as well. I didn't know Alex could do it until later. So originally there was this guy named Ryan who was going to play another part in 12th Night before he quit. And he seemed like a real buff, good guy. So, but then he had to quit. So Ryan's character, Ryan being Lathrop, was cut, and the Lathrop character kind of hung around for a while until I could figure out who was going to play him, and we were actually shooting a couple scenes before we had a Lathrop. Annabelle, who's Annie, I was auditioning people, and at the time I didn't have a sister character, and because I liked Annabelle, I think she says she didn't mind being called Annie, so I'm just going to call her Annie. Because I liked Annie's auditions so much, I think she was auditioning for Melissa's role of Bevan, best friend. But I couldn't really see Sarah and Annie interacting the same way that we saw Sarah and Melissa interacting. Maybe because of age, height difference, I didn't really see them working the same way, but I did see them working as a sister-sister thing. And I had seen a movie recently called Blue Crush, which most people didn't really like. It was an American surfer movie, but I actually liked it a lot. And Kate Bosworth had a sister named Penny, I believe. And a lot of what you see with between Sarah and Annie are not copied completely, but the type of the relationship that they have is what you see with Kate and Penny in that movie. So I actually wrote the sister character just because of Annie. In the car ride where Sarah picks up Melissa, that was one of the places where I infused some Annie lines just to insert her into the scene. And I actually wrote some new scenes, like what we saw in the room that I'm in right now, filming them interacting, having a little sister-sister confrontation with the boyfriend. Charlie, I was thinking recently how I cast Charlie, because he wasn't in any classes of mine, and he wasn't in any films. So I must have just seen him in the lobby of UEA Studio and asked him, and he said, yeah. Hannes, I cast because he was in 12th Night too, and I wasn't sure whether he would be playing Malcolm or Diego, but in the end, when I auditioned Mark, I knew Mark had to be Malcolm because he read that so much better, and so it was pretty easy to cast Mark as Malcolm. So Diego was there, Hannes was there for as Diego. Melissa's probably pretty interesting, well, fairly interesting story, at least one that I'm not going to be cutting out of what I'm talking about right now. I still hadn't had a Bevan, and I went to the city center one day, I forget why. On the bus ride back, Melissa and a friend of hers were sitting a seat in front of mine, and I had caught her. I glanced up at her coming in to the bus and seen down in front of me, and she and her friend were dressed real elegantly posh, I guess, if that's like the British word for it, whatever. But she seemed like glamorous, hip kind of girl, and that's exactly like if I wanted a Bevan character. Just to appear right before me, that was her. So I wasn't sure if I was just going to ask her to be in it or not. So I made a little like game with myself that if she got dropped off at my same stop at university, then that meant she was a university student. Then I would go up and ask her. If she got off before university, then, and if she was a townie, then it probably would have been too difficult, and she would have been too ambivalent about it. But she did get off at the university stop, and so. She got off. There were some people in front of me. I had to run over to see her, and it was quite cold that day, and I didn't have gloves, so my hands were kind of shaking. And the hand shaking and my breath and all that, I think she thought that. She definitely thought that it was going to be some sort of porn. So I reassured her that, and I said that I'd email her a copy of the script. I got her email. I didn't get a phone number. And after she read the script, she said okay. And I think that turned out to be one of my better. I liked everybody that I cast, but that was because of the nature of if she didn't get on that same bus, we would have had a completely different Melissa character, and I think she worked out very well. So that's that. I think it's just about. Alex was the last choice, but basically cast. I think he turned out well, but I cast him because he was the only guy that, as opposed to having middle-aged men. Hit on Sarah. Alex was the only guy that worked well in that sort of scenario. I cast myself because I was in Danger Girl as a Bosley type character. For their Charlie's Angels, I was a Bosley character. It's more of a role than Hitchcock has in his films. It's like a Quentin Tarantino kind of role in his movies, where it's not quite a middle brow kind of part, like he's in fair amount but not too much that it gets to be a problem. So I'm in the phone conversation. I play Sarah's brother. I guess that's it. Filming. I'll brush over this quickly. It was easy to get a lot of locations that I thought were going to be difficult. The chapel, I guess since it's a public space, all I had to do was go in and ask the people, the authority figure, if I can film, and he didn't have a problem with it. When we got, so getting spaces like that, like the chapel, getting seminar rooms, stuff like that, wasn't too difficult to process. But then when we actually get there, problems arise, like at the chapel. Emma and Sarah and I get there, and then bells start ringing. But in the end, it worked out well because we got a little tomb-like antechamber room that worked out better than how I had planned it with the pews. So you see Emma get up from the pews and walk away, and Sarah has to follow her, and stuff like that is done just because you heard bells ringing. So that's why there's music overlapping that. And that's why they had to move. The courtroom was also pretty easy, although I had to go there, talk to the court manager, and then write a letter explaining what I was doing. And he talked to him again, and he said he approved it mainly because I was a university student. And so I had to call beforehand to let security know that we were coming in. I ended up using the courtroom on 3 separate occasions. And we never actually shot in the courtroom with everybody in the scene involved. So even though it looks like everyone's in the room, you might actually, when we're actually shooting stuff, it might only be for the professor, the judge, for instance. Most of the stuff that we shot with him, he was the only person in the room. So the reason why there aren't any giant wide shots of everybody in the courtroom is because we didn't physically have everybody there. All the house stuff is Sarah's own house that she lives in with 2 other people. Her room is her actual room, stuff like that. All right, no, I'll
It's
edit
not
that.
normally a mess, though.
What other locations were there? Most of the stuff happens on campus. The classrooms were on campus, the UEA campus. I think that's, yeah, next question.
Did you actually enjoy it, and where do you see this going?
Yeah, this is, because I'm still in it, I can't reminisce about whether this is the thing I've had the most fun on, but I think it's definitely the most professional thing I've ever done. And it's good that I'd be worried if I didn't get more professional as I went along. But yeah, this is also the first thing that I think I'm going to make money on, so that's good. I didn't go into it wanting to make money, but because of the enthusiasm from professional people, I'm interested in seeing how far this will go. So not specifically because of that, but the cast